The snowfall had transformed the abandoned city into something otherworldly. Claire Hendricks watched through the transport window as skeletal buildings passed by, their windows empty as dead eyes, their walls draped in white like burial shrouds. The road hadn't been cleared in weeks. The driver, a kid who couldn't be older than 22, kept both hands tight on the wheel, navigating by instinct more than sight. "Outpost Delta 7, 2 clicks ahead," he announced, his voice flat with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd learned not to feel too much about anything. Claire didn't respond. Her duffel bag sat between her boots, civilian clothes, a few books. Nothing that suggested she'd once held the record for the longest confirmed kill in this theater. 32 months since her last deployment. 32 months of teaching marksmanship to recruits who still flinched at loud noises, of filing reports that no one read, of pretending that a desk job felt like purpose. The base materialized through the snow like a fortress from another century. Concrete walls, razor wire, guard towers that looked half collapsed but weren't. Claire recognized the architecture of improvisation sandbags stacked where mortar had crumbled, metal sheets welded over blast damage. This wasn't a base. It was a statement. We're still here. The gate guard checked her civilian ID 3 times. "Captain Hendricks isn't expecting visitors," he said, suspicious. The nameplate on his jacket read Morrison. "She's my sister." Morrison's expression shifted, not softening. Exactly, but recalibrating. The twin. Claire had heard that tone before. The stories preceded her. The Hendricks sisters, identical in face and different in everything else. Both training with rifles before they could legally drive, both enlisting the same week, both becoming snipers through different paths. Stories had a way of growing in the retelling. She wondered what version this kid had heard. "Wait here." 5 minutes later, Captain Rachel Hendricks emerged from the operations building. She wore fatigues that had been washed so many times the camouflage pattern was fading. Her hair, the same ash blonde as Claire's, was pulled back in a regulation bun. They had the same sharp jawline, the same gray-green eyes, the same way of standing with weight slightly forward, always ready to move. Rachel stopped 3 feet away. "You're not supposed to be here. 48-hour leave. I can visit family. This isn't a summer camp, Claire." "I know what it is." Claire picked up her duffel. "I trained half the people who built it." Rachel's jaw tightened, the same tell she'd had since childhood when she was angry but knew she couldn't win an argument. 72 hours. Then you're on the next transport out. No exceptions. Understood. They walked through the base in silence. Claire cataloged everything. The defensive positions, the sight lines, the weak points in the perimeter. Old habits. She noticed the soldiers watching them, doing double takes, whispering. The legend multiplied. Rachel's quarters were Spartan, a cot, a footlocker, a small desk covered in topographical maps and weather reports. A single photograph sat on the desk, the two of them at age 16, holding their father's hunting rifles, grinning like they'd just discovered the secret to flight. "You've lost weight," Claire said. "Winter rations. Supply convoy's been delayed 3 weeks. Rachel pulled 2 bottles of water from a small cooler. "Command keeps promising reinforcements. We keep adjusting to reality." "How many in your unit?" 37. Down from 52. Rachel handed her a bottle. "Before you ask, none from action. Medical evacuations, rotations that never got replaced, one idiot who shot himself cleaning his weapon." Claire unscrewed the cap slowly. "The city? Officially abandoned. Unofficially, we track movement every few days. Scavengers, mostly. Sometimes scouts. We don't engage unless engaged." Rachel moved to the window, looked out at the falling snow. "Intel says the main hostile forces pulled back 50 kilometers east. This is just a monitoring post now. Quiet sector. You don't believe that." "I believe," Rachel said carefully, "that quiet sectors have a way of becoming loud without warning." The wind picked up outside, rattling the window frame. Claire studied the maps on Rachel's desk. Someone had marked them extensively, enemy sightlines in red, friendly positions in blue, evacuation routes in green. The work of a mind that never stopped thinking about survival. "The bell tower," Claire said, pointing to a marking on the city map. 300 meters northwest. "That's new." Rachel turned. "Collapsed last month. Snow load. We heard it go down, sounded like thunder. Good overwatch position before it fell." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Claire had taught Rachel to think like this, to see every structure as either cover or exposure, every distance as either manageable or impossible. They'd been 12 when their father took them hunting for the first time, 15 when they shot their first competition, 17 when they enlisted. Two sisters who spoke in the language of windage and elevation, of breathing and patience. "Why did you really come?" Rachel asked. Claire met her sister's eyes. "Because I missed you." "Bullshit." "Fine. Because I'm going crazy behind a desk. Because I keep having dreams about this place. Because—" She stopped. "I don't know. Call it instinct." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How long since you fired a weapon?" 8 months. Qualification range. "That's too long." "I know." The snow fell harder outside. Somewhere in the base, a generator coughed and died, then roared back to life. Claire thought about the old saying their father used to repeat, "There's no such thing as a routine patrol. There's only the one before everything changes." "Get some sleep," Rachel said. "If you're staying, you follow my rules. That means lights out in 2 hours. Wake up at 0500. This isn't a vacation." "I never thought it was." Claire couldn't sleep. The cot was fine, she'd slept on worse, but something in the air felt wrong. She dressed and moved through the base, past sleeping quarters and equipment lockers, drawn by muscle memory toward the armory. The duty officer was reading by flashlight. He looked up, startled, then relaxed when he saw the guest badge on her jacket. "Help you, ma'am?" "Just restless. Mind if I look around?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Captain Hendricks vouched for you. Just don't touch anything without asking." The armory smelled like gun oil and metal, a scent that carried more nostalgia than any perfume. Claire moved between the racks, noting the inventory. Standard-issue rifles mostly. A few designated marksman weapons. 3 sniper systems that looked well-maintained but old. Her fingers itched to check the scopes, to feel the weight of a long gun in her hands again. "That one's mine." Claire turned. Rachel stood in the doorway, wearing a thermal jacket over her fatigues. She moved past Claire and lifted one of the sniper rifles, a bolt-action system with a suppressor and a scope that had been modified so many times it barely resembled the factory model. "Can't sleep either?" Claire asked. "Habit. I do a perimeter check every 3 hours." Rachel worked the bolt, checked the chamber empty, then handed the rifle to Claire. "You remember the fundamentals?" Claire took the weapon, felt its familiar weight settle into her hands. The stock had been customized, the trigger pull adjusted. Like breathing. "Show me." They moved to the range and outdoor facility protected by berms and noise baffles. The snow had stopped temporarily, leaving the night crystalline and cold. Rachel set up a series of targets at varying distances, while Claire familiarized herself with the rifle's characteristics. 300 meters, Rachel called out. Wind from the northwest at 8 knots. Temperature -12. Claire settled into position. The movement's automatic. Breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The scope's reticle found the target, and for the first time in months, the constant noise in her head went silent. There was only the shot. The trigger broke clean. The rifle bucked. 300 meters away, the target sprouted a hole dead center. "Again," Rachel said. 500. They worked through distances, through wind calculations, through the mathematics of trajectory and drift. Claire felt the rust shake loose, felt the old precision return. Rachel didn't speak, just observed, making small adjustments to her own rifle as she watched. Finally, Rachel stepped to the line beside her sister. One shot, 750 meters, that target cluster at the far berm. They fired simultaneously. 2 impacts, close enough to overlap. Rachel lowered her rifle first. "You've still got it." "Different styles," Claire said. "You always favored speed over patience. Urban warfare teaches you to shoot fast or die slow." Rachel ejected her magazine, began breaking down the weapon for cleaning. "You remember what Dad used to say? A sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, it's time." He was wrong. Rachel's hands moved through the cleaning ritual with practiced efficiency. Time matters, but only if you're still alive to use it. I've seen hundreds snipers who waited for the perfect shot. Half of them died waiting. Claire cleaned her own weapon in silence, considering this. Their training had diverged after basic Rachel assigned to rapid response urban units, Claire to long-range reconnaissance teams. Different theaters, different doctrines. But the foundation remained the same. "You remember the pact?" Claire asked quietly. Rachel's hands paused for just a moment. "If one of us is shooting, the other is watching their back. Even now?" "Even now." They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from years of shared experience. The wind picked up again, carrying fresh snow across the range. Claire looked out at the abandoned city, its ruins barely visible through the darkness and weather. "Something's coming," she said. Rachel didn't ask what she meant. "I know." The attack came at 0347 hours, during the shift change when alertness naturally dipped. Claire was awake. She'd never really slept, standing at the window of Rachel's quarters when the first explosion lit up the northern perimeter. The communications tower disintegrated in a cascade of sparks and metal. The blast wave hit 3 seconds later, rattling windows across the base. Alarms started screaming. Lights flickered and died as the backup generator took a direct hit. Rachel was on her feet instantly, grabbing her rifle and tactical vest. Stay in. Not a chance. Claire was already pulling on her jacket, her mind cataloging what she'd seen. Coordinated strikes on infrastructure, timed for maximum confusion. This wasn't probing. This was a kill shot. They ran into organized chaos. Soldiers poured from barracks, NCOs shouting orders, defensive positions manning up with the speed of frequent drills. Lieutenant Morrison, the kid from the gate, was coordinating the northern sector, his voice steady despite the blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Contact northeast and southwest. Multiple positions. They're using the ruins for... A bullet took Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground hard. Rachel grabbed him, dragged him behind a sandbag wall. How many? Can't tell. Snipers for sure. Maybe 30, maybe more. Morrison's face was gray. They took out comms first. We're isolated. The major commanding the base appeared, moving low and fast. His name was Walsh, a career officer with 3 combat deployments and a face that looked carved from granite. Captain Hendricks, I need you on Overwatch. The church tower. Collapsed last month, Rachel cut in. Sir, the crane on the east side. Do it. Take whoever you need. Rachel looked at Claire. Walsh followed her gaze, recognition flickering across his face. Jesus Christ, the twin. Sir, I'm not active duty, Claire started. I don't care if you're the goddamn tooth fairy. Can you shoot? Yes, sir. Then shoot. Walsh moved on, barking orders, organizing the defense with grim efficiency. Incoming fire intensified. The enemy had planned this well, multiple angles of attack, suppressing fire, keeping defenders pinned, sniper teams taking out anyone who showed themselves. Claire grabbed a rifle from a wounded soldier who wouldn't need it anymore. The weapon was unfamiliar, the balance wrong, but it would do. Split positions, Rachel said. I'll take the crane. You take. An explosion rocked the western wall. Mortar fire, walking closer with each impact. The old water tower, Claire said. 300 meters southeast. It's outside the perimeter, but it has sightlines on there. You'll be cut off. I'll be effective. They stared at each other for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then Rachel nodded once, sharp. Don't die. You neither. They moved in opposite directions, into the snow and the gunfire and the chaos of a base that was rapidly becoming a killing ground. Claire ran low through the snow, using every piece of cover burned out vehicles, supply crates, sections of collapsed wall. Bullets snapped past, close enough to feel the displacement. The rifle in her hands was a Remington 700, not her preferred platform but serviceable. She'd fired it enough times to know its quirks. The water tower loomed ahead, a skeletal structure of rust and ice. Claire hit the ladder at a sprint, climbing hand over hand while rounds sparked off metal around her. Her lungs burned. The cold air felt like knives. She reached the platform, a circular catwalk with a partial roof that provided minimal protection, and immediately took up position. From here, she could see the entire northeastern approach and part of the city ruins beyond. She counted at least 7 muzzle flashes from elevated positions. Professional placement. Someone had planned this carefully. Claire chambered around, settled into her breathing pattern. The scope was a civilian model, but properly zeroed. She found her first target, a sniper in a 4th-floor window, approximately 400 meters out. Wind was tricky here, gusting and variable. She squeezed the trigger. The enemy sniper fell back from the window. Immediately, fire converged on her position. Claire rolled left as bullets chewed through the catwalk where she'd been lying. She found new cover, reacquired targets. This was the old rhythm, the ancient dance. She'd forgotten how much she missed it. Below, the base defense was organizing. Walsh had positioned his people well overlapping fields of fire, mobile reaction teams, discipline under pressure, but they were outnumbered and taking casualties. The enemy had the advantage of surprise and superior positioning. Claire found another target, fired. Missed. The bullet went wide. She adjusted for wind, fired again. Hit. Her radio crackled Rachel's voice through static. Tower, this is Crane. I have eyes on enemy command element. 800 meters, northeast sector, 3rd building from the monument. Civilian clothes, directing fire by radio. Claire swung her scope, found the building, the window, the figure half hidden behind concrete. 800 meters. In this wind, with this rifle, that was a prayer shot. I can't make that, she transmitted back. I can't either. Not from this angle. Rachel's voice was tight. We need to fire together. Same target, different vectors. One of us hits. Claire's breath misted in the cold. This was what their father had taught them, what they'd practiced 1,000 times. Synchronized fire, overwhelming single-point defense through coordination. It required perfect timing, perfect trust. On your mark, Claire said. Calculating. Rachel went silent. Claire watched the target through her scope, compensating mentally for the distance, the wind, the cold affecting powder burn. She'd need to aim 2 feet high and a foot right, maybe more. Fire in 3, 2, 1, now. Claire squeezed the trigger at the exact instant Rachel did. She couldn't see Rachel's bullet 800 meters away, traveling a different path, but she saw both impacts. The enemy commander dropped. The change was immediate. Coordinated fire from the ruins became sporadic, confused. Without direction, the attackers lost cohesion. Good shot, Rachel transmitted. You too. But the battle wasn't over. The enemy still had numbers, still had position, and now they were angry. The attack intensified. Whoever was now commanding the enemy forces, probably a second in command, was throwing everything at the base. Mortars walked across the compound. Heavy machine gun fire from multiple positions kept defenders pinned. Claire worked methodically, picking targets by priority. Gunners first, then spotters, then anyone directing troops. The rifle grew hot despite the cold. Empty casings piled at her feet. She'd lost count of shots fired. Below, she saw Walsh organizing a counterattack, a team preparing to push out toward the nearest enemy position. Brave but stupid. They'd be slaughtered in the open. She keyed her radio. Major, this is the tower. Advise, hold your position. You'll be in a crossfire. Who the hell is this? Claire Hendricks. Sir, I can see 3 machine gun nests you can't. If you push now, you'll lose everyone. Static. Then, what do you recommend? Give me 2 minutes. I'll suppress the east position. Captain Hendricks can suppress the west. You push up the middle on my signal. You're not in the chain of command. Sir, with respect, right now I'm your best option. Another pause. Then, 2 minutes. Make them count. Claire transmitted to Rachel. Crane, we're running counter-suppression for a push. West side machine gun, on my mark. Copy. I see it. Claire found her target a PKM machine gun in a blown-out storefront. Crew of 3. They'd set up smart, with good cover and interlocking fire with other positions. Taking out the gunner wouldn't be enough. She'd need to make them abandon the position entirely. She fired 3 shots in rapid succession: gunner, assistant gunner, ammo bearer. All hits. The position went silent. Now, she transmitted to Walsh. Below, the counterattack launched. Rachel's rifle barked from the crane, keeping the western position suppressed. Walsh's team moved fast and low, covering the 100 meters to their objective in under 20 seconds. They hit the enemy position with grenades and close-range fire. The momentum shifted. For the next 30 minutes, Claire and Rachel became ghosts in the battle, unseen, everywhere, changing the equation with every shot. The enemy couldn't pinpoint their positions. Every time attackers massed for a push, one of the sisters broke it apart. Every time a defender was pinned, covering fire appeared from an unexpected angle. Claire lost herself in the work. There was no past, no future, only the eternal present of the scope and the trigger. She was dimly aware that she'd transitioned to a different rifle at some point. Someone had passed weapons up to her position, but the details blurred together. The enemy began to withdraw. Rachel watched the withdrawal begin and knew it was a feint. She'd seen this pattern before: fake retreat to draw defenders into the open, then hit them from reserve positions. Professional tactics. Tower, don't trust the withdrawal, she transmitted. They're regrouping for something. Copy. I see movement in the northeast quadrant, deep in the ruins. Rachel swung her scope to where Claire indicated. At first she saw nothing, just empty buildings and snow. Then there, a flash of movement, too coordinated to be random. She adjusted her focus, pushed the magnification higher. Vehicles. At least 6 of them, painted white for winter camouflage, positioning behind the ruins for a final assault. They're bringing up armor, Rachel transmitted. Light vehicles, but enough to punch through our defenses. Below, Walsh was already responding to the threat, repositioning his limited anti-armor capabilities. But it wouldn't be enough. The base was designed to defend against infantry, not mechanized assault. Rachel studied the enemy formation, tactical mind racing. The vehicles were staging behind a partially collapsed apartment complex, using it for cover while they prepared. The lead vehicle, probably command, sat slightly forward, coordinating the formation. 850 meters, difficult shot even in good conditions. In this wind, with this cold, nearly impossible. But if that vehicle went down, the formation would be disrupted. Doctrine said the second vehicle would take over, but that required time for defenders to target the rest, time for Walsh to reposition. Rachel did the calculations. Wind from the northeast at 12 knots, gusting to 15, temperature -15 and dropping, target partially obscured, possibly moving. She'd need to aim 3 feet high, 2 feet left, and even then she was guessing. Tower. I'm taking a shot on the command vehicle. Northeast formation. Negative, Claire responded. Range is too far in these conditions. Even for you. It's the only shot that matters. Rachel settled deeper into position. The crane swayed slightly in the wind, normally a liability, but she'd learned to use it, to time her shots in the brief moments of stability. She controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, entered the state her instructors had called the quiet place, that strange mental space where time seemed to expand and the entire world narrowed to a single point of focus. The crosshairs found the command vehicle. Driver's side door. The commander would be inside, probably coordinating by radio. Armored, but not against a 308 round at the right angle. She breathed out slowly, squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. Through the scope, Rachel watched the bullets trace a line of disturbed air across the snowscape. For a fraction of a second, she thought she'd missed. Then the command vehicle's window spiderwebbed and the vehicle lurched to a stop. The formation hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Walsh's anti-armor team engaged, taking out the second vehicle with a well-placed rocket. The enemy formation began to scatter. Some vehicles attempted to push forward anyway, but without coordination they were picked off individually. The assault broke apart. But the enemy wasn't finished. If anything, losing their vehicles made them more desperate. Infantry poured from the ruins in a last-ditch assault, accepting horrific casualties to reach the perimeter. This wasn't tactics anymore. This was a death charge. Rachel's rifle went dry. She dropped the magazine, reached for a reload, found nothing. Tower, I'm out. Hold position. I'll bring you ammunition. Negative. You're too exposed. But Claire was already moving. Rachel watched through her scope as her sister descended from the water tower, hitting the ground at a run. She'd abandoned subtlety, sprinting directly across open ground toward the supply depot, bullets kicking up snow all around her. Rachel couldn't shoot to protect her no ammunition. She could only watch as Claire disappeared into the depot, emerged carrying a heavy pack of magazines, and started back. An enemy soldier appeared around a corner, rifle raised. Claire didn't break, stride. She dropped the pack, drew her sidearm in one fluid motion, and put 2 rounds center mass before the soldier could fire. She grabbed the pack again and kept running. Rachel had stopped breathing. Her sister covered the 100 meters to the crane in what felt like hours, but was probably 20 seconds. Claire hit the ladder, started climbing while still carrying the pack. "You're insane," Rachel transmitted. "Probably." Claire reached the crane platform, breathing hard, and tossed the pack to Rachel. 40 magazines. Make them count. Rachel started loading magazines into her vest. "You should have stayed." "Shut up and shoot." They turned together to face the final assault. The enemy was at the wire now, cutting through with bolt cutters, pouring through gaps in the defense. Hand-to-hand fighting broke out in parts of the base. This was the moment either they held or everything collapsed. Rachel fired. Claire fired. 2 rifles, 2 minds, thinking as one, working the field like a combination orchestra and execution squad. They created zones of fire, safe corridors for friendly troops, kill boxes for the enemy. The defenders rallied around them, fed by the knowledge that somewhere in the snow and chaos, 2 unseen guardians were holding the line. The fighting reached a crescendo of violence, brutal, close, desperate. Then, slowly, it began to ebb. The enemy pulled back, then pulled back further. The attack had failed. Dawn began to break, pale and cold, revealing the battlefield in all its horror. Bodies in the snow, vehicles burning. The base was scarred but standing. Rachel lowered her rifle, hands shaking from adrenaline and cold. "How many rounds did you fire?" Claire checked her weapon. "No idea. Lost count around 200. They sat in silence, watching the sun rise over the dead city. Rachel wanted to say something profound, something that captured the magnitude of what they'd just survived, but all that came out was, "Thanks for visiting." Claire laughed a slightly hysterical sound that turned into a cough. Best family reunion ever. The base looked like hell in daylight. 14 dead, 23 wounded, and physical damage that would take months to repair. But it was still standing. The survivors were still breathing. In war, that counted as victory. Helicopters appeared at 0800, the quick reaction force that should have arrived 6 hours ago. Better late than useful. But the wounded needed evacuation, and the base needed supplies. Walsh met the incoming commander, a colonel who looked at the destruction and went pale. What happened here? Coordinated assault, approximately 60 to 80 hostiles, armor support, full communications blackout. Walsh's voice was flat with exhaustion. We held. Walsh gestured toward the crane, where Rachel was climbing down, and toward the water tower, where Claire was doing the same. 2 snipers. One of them doesn't even officially exist. The colonel watched as the sisters approached, moving with the careful stiffness of people who'd been in the same position too long. They were covered in soot and cordite, faces pale with cold and fatigue, but they walked with their heads up. Captain Hendricks, you're being recommended for a commendation, the colonel said. Then to Claire. And you are? Nobody important, sir. Just visiting family. Visiting. The colonel's expression suggested he didn't believe a word of it. Major Walsh tells me you personally confirmed 19 kills, plus supporting actions that prevented multiple friendly casualties. I wasn't counting, sir. She's being modest, Rachel interjected. Without her, we'd all be dead. The colonel studied them both identical faces, different scars. The resemblance is uncanny. I've heard stories about the Hendricks twins, but I thought they were exaggerated. They probably are, Claire said. Most stories get bigger in the retelling. Wounded were being loaded onto helicopters. Morrison, the kid from the gate who'd taken a bullet in the shoulder, gave them a weak salute as he passed. Other soldiers stopped to nod, to offer quiet thanks. The survivors knew what they owed. Walsh approached, carrying 2 steaming cups. Coffee. Terrible quality, but hot. They accepted gratefully. The warmth was almost painful after hours in the cold. There'll be an investigation, Walsh said quietly. Miss Hendricks, you're technically a civilian now. You engaged in combat without authorization, using military weapons, in a foreign theater. There will be questions. I understand, sir. For what it's worth. Walsh paused. I'll make sure the record reflects what actually happened, not the sanitized version, not the politically convenient version. The truth. Claire met his eyes. Thank you, sir. Walsh moved on to organize the evacuation priorities. The colonel was already on his radio, calling in more support, arranging for a permanent relief force. The base would be reinforced now. Too little, too late for the 14 who died, but it would prevent future attacks. Rachel sipped her coffee, staring at the ruins beyond the perimeter. They'll come back. Probably, Claire agreed. Next time with better planning. Next time there won't be 2 of us. The words sat between them, heavy with implication. Claire would return to her desk job, her safe existence behind the lines. Rachel would stay here, in this frozen wasteland, watching the city and waiting for the next attack. The war would continue. Life would continue. But something had shifted, some balance they'd maintained for years had tipped. Come with me, Claire said suddenly. Request a transfer. We could both be instructors. Train the next generation. Together. Rachel shook her head slowly. This is where I'm needed. You saw what happened when they weren't ready. Someone has to hold this line. Someone. Not necessarily you. Yes. Necessarily me. Rachel looked at her sister. You left because you couldn't do this anymore. That was the right choice for you. But I'm not you. However much we look alike, Claire wanted to argue, wanted to point out that nobody could sustain this forever, that Rachel was burning herself down one firefight at a time. But she understood. Rachel had found her purpose in this frozen hell, and purpose was too rare to dismiss. Then I'll come back, Claire said. Not officially. Not on the books. But next time there's trouble. You'll be behind a desk 3,000 miles away. I'll make it work. They finished their coffee in silence, watching the sun climb higher in the pale sky. The snow had stopped falling. For now. The official report, filed 3 weeks later, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic obfuscation. During the defense of Forward Operating Base Delta 7, multiple personnel distinguished themselves through exceptional actions under fire. Captain Rachel Hendricks demonstrated outstanding leadership and marksmanship, personally confirming numerous enemy casualties and providing critical overwatch during the engagement. Additional supporting personnel, including civilian observers present at the base, contributed to defensive operations in accordance with base security protocols. Civilian observers. That was Claire reduced to 2 words and a footnote. The classified addendum told a different story. Walsh had been thorough. Coordinates of sniper positions, timeline of events, radio transcripts, and statements from every survivor. 19 confirmed kills for Claire, 17 for Rachel. But more importantly, the document detailed how 2 snipers working without official coordination or command authority had held together a defense that should have collapsed. The addendum was marked distribution restricted and sent to exactly 3 people: the theater commander, the intelligence directorate, and the head of sniper training programs. One of those 3 people made a phone call. Claire was in her office reviewing qualification scores for a training cycle that seemed mind-numbingly pointless after 3 weeks of nightmares about snow and gunfire when her commanding officer entered. Colonel Davidson was career military, old school, not prone to surprises. He looked at Claire like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Close the door." Claire did. "Sir, I received an interesting call this morning from someone whose name I can't mention regarding events I'm not cleared to discuss, at a location that officially doesn't exist." Davidson sat down without being invited. "You want to tell me your version?" "I visited my sister, sir. There was an attack. I assisted with the defense." "Assisted." Davidson pulled out a printed document, the classified addendum. Claire realized with sinking certainty. 19 confirmed kills, multiple acts of tactical coordination under fire, direct radio communication with the base commander during active operations. That's not assisting. That's combat. "Sir, Shut up and listen." Davidson's voice was tired more than angry. "This could go several ways. They could charge you with a dozen violations, unauthorized combat operations, use of military resources, breaching your civilian contract. They could make an example of you." Claire kept her expression neutral. "Yes, sir," or... Davidson tapped the document. "Someone at a level far above my pay grade thinks your skills are being wasted behind a desk. There's an opening for a senior instructor at the Advanced Marksmanship School, Fort Benning. You'd be training the trainers, the people who go to places like Delta 7 and keep them alive." "Sir, There's a catch." Davidson's expression was unreadable. "You'd be subject to emergency recall. If another situation develops, another base under threat, another crisis, they want the option to send you in. Officially classified as security consultant. But we both know what that means." Claire processed this. They were offering her purpose again, but on their terms. A leash that looked like freedom. "What if I refuse?" "Then you finish your current contract and separate honorably. No charges, no problems. But also no more access. You'd be completely civilian." The choice was clear enough. Safe mediocrity or dangerous purpose. She thought about Rachel, still at Delta 7, still holding that frozen line. She thought about the soldiers who'd survived because 2 sisters had refused to let them die. "I accept the position, sir." Davidson nodded slowly. "You'll report to Benning in 6 weeks. There will be paperwork. There will be classifications you can't discuss. And there will be times when a phone rings at 3 a.m. and you have to go somewhere you can't tell anyone about. I understand." "Do you?" Davidson stood. "Because the report says you and your sister worked together like you were reading each other's minds. That kind of coordination doesn't come from training. It comes from something deeper. If they send you back to her base or bases like it, they're going to expect that same level of performance. Every time." Claire met his eyes. "Then that's what they'll get, sir." After Davidson left, Claire sat alone in her office for a long time. She pulled out her phone, started to call Rachel, then stopped. Her sister would be on duty now, watching the ruins, thinking about the next attack. They'd talk eventually, but not yet. Some conversations required silence first. 3 years later, Fort Benning's Advanced Marksmanship School had a new reputation. The washout rate had tripled under Claire's instruction, but graduates were performing at levels previously thought impossible. They called her Ice, partly for her demeanor, partly for how she talked about Delta 7, the battle in the snow that had become legendary in sniper circles. Rachel had been promoted to major, still stationed at Delta 7. The base had been reinforced, expanded, turned into a proper fortress. No more attacks had come, but she trained her soldiers as if one was always imminent. They called her Steel, flexible but unbreakable. On the anniversary of the battle, Claire received a package. Inside was a photograph, the base memorial, a simple stone wall with 14 names carved into it. At the bottom, in smaller letters, defended by all, saved by 2. Her phone rang. "Hey," Rachel said. Her voice sounded different, older, maybe, or just more worn. "Hey yourself. I got the picture. They unveiled it last week. Full ceremony. Survivors flew in. Morrison's there, he runs a training program now. Walsh retired, but he came back for it. Claire studied the photograph. They spelled my name wrong. Rachel laughed. I know. I tried to get them to fix it, but the stone was already carved. You're Claire now. One less I. I can live with that. They were quiet for a moment, connected across 3,000 miles by satellites and silence. Claire thought about that night, the snow, the gunfire, the perfect synchronization of two minds working as one. She wondered if it would ever happen again. There's talk about expanding the forward bases, Rachel said. More resources, more personnel. They want experienced officers to help with the setup. You volunteering? No. But they asked if I knew anyone who could run advanced training for forward base defenders. Someone who understands both the tactics and the reality. Claire felt something shift in her chest. And you said? I said I'd ask my sister. She's picky about assignments, but if the job is important enough, tell me more. They talked for an hour, sketching out ideas, possibilities, problems, and solutions. By the end, Claire had agreed to visit Benning's commander to discuss a proposal for a joint training program. Nothing certain, nothing promised, but a door opening. After they hung up, Claire returned to the photograph. 14 names, 2 defenders, 1 base that had survived when it should have died. She thought about Walsh's words, the truth, not the sanitized version. The truth was that war was chaos and preparation, and luck tangled together until you couldn't separate them. The truth was that sometimes 2 people who'd spent a lifetime learning to shoot could spend one night proving that all that training mattered. The truth was that some battles weren't won by armies or strategies, but by individuals who refused to accept defeat. The truth was that she'd spent 3 years teaching others, but part of her was still on that water tower, in the snow, with her sister's voice in her earpiece and a target in her sights. The truth was that she'd do it again, anytime, anywhere. Her phone buzzed, a message from Rachel, sent after they'd hung up. Just 3 words. Miss you, twin. Claire typed back, always watching your back. Because that was the truth, too. The most important truth. They were 2 people who'd been born minutes apart, who'd learned to shoot before they could drive, who'd chosen the same impossible profession and excelled through different paths. They were separated by distance and assignment, by the requirements of duty and the realities of war. But they were never really apart. Somewhere in the world, in a dozen bases like Delta 7, young snipers were learning their craft. Some of them would face impossible situations. Some of them would have to hold the line when logic said to retreat. Some of them would discover in the worst moments of their lives that training mattered, that preparation mattered, that the fundamentals their instructors had drilled into them would make the difference between survival and death. And somewhere behind those instructors, invisible but present, were 2 sisters who'd proven it could be done. Claire stood, stretched, and walked to the window. The training range was visible in the distance, tiny figures in the cold, learning to breathe and aim and squeeze, learning the discipline that might, someday, save their lives or the lives of people who depended on them. She thought about that night in the snow, about the moment when everything hung in balance and 2 rifles had fired as one, about holding a position that should have been overrun, about making shots that should have been impossible, about surviving what should have killed them. The snow had stopped falling 3 years ago, but the lesson remained. Some people looked at obstacles and saw reasons to quit. Some people looked at impossible situations and found ways to adapt. And some people, a rare few, looked at certain death and said, not today. Claire Hendricks had been teaching for 3 years, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that somewhere in the future was another frozen base, another desperate night, another moment when someone would look up from the darkness and see 2 rifles firing in perfect synchronization. And on that night, whenever it came, she would be ready. Because that was the truth, the only truth that mattered. 2 sisters, 1 promise, forever.